if your business is broken, sales will only accelerate your bleeding. So sales don't cure all ills, as much as it pains me to say that. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Fitz and Franson Show. As usual, I'm Fitz.
Yeah, and I'm Franson.
And this is a show where we talk about leadership, business, growth, and what it actually takes to build something that lasts with outlining yourself along the way.
Yeah, and if you guys haven't figured it out by now, we're not here for hype. We're here for clarity, because chaos is normal in business, but staying there is definitely a choice.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, if you listen to last week's episode, we left you with a bit of a cliffhanger. We told you that today we were gonna expose one hidden metric that is quietly killing businesses right now. We're gonna deliver on that promise for sure. But before we do, let's kick things off with our daily inspirations rundown. We track what our audience is searching for and what the biggest conversations in the business world are right now. We can bring you the content that actually matters.
Yeah. Love this. And the data is fascinating. You know, across socials, you got LinkedIn, you got Reddit, you got entrepreneur forums, you got other social media platforms where people are talking about a lot of different things in the small business space. And there's a big conversation bubbling up about kind of the dark side of scaling. You know, you got the Alex Hormozis and the Gary Vaynerchuks and the Dan Martells and the Tony Robbins that are out there saying, grow, grow, grow. But to be honest, everyone, for the most part, wants to grow. Everyone wants to sell more, right? But the founders who've actually scaled, to a certain extent, they're even like sounding an alarm, saying that growth without the structure is just a faster way to fail.
Yeah, it is the ultimate paradox, right? So business owners think that if they just sell more, all their problems will be solved, right? Sales solves all things, right? And that's a phrase that Jay loves for sure.
Yeah.
But if your internal systems aren't ready, selling more is actually what will destroy you.
Yeah. So let's get right to the hot take for today. You know, the conventional wisdom in the entrepreneurial space really is always be closing. The idea is that sales cure all ills. If you have cash flow problems, sell more. If you have margin problems, sell more.
Yeah, and I'm going to call complete bullshit on that right now. So sales don't cure all ills, as much as it pains me to say that. In fact, if your business is broken, sales will only accelerate your bleeding. So my hot take is this. The most dangerous thing you can do as a business owner is sell a product or service that you do not have the capacity to install or deliver on.
Yeah, and that's a heavy statement for sure. You know, the most dangerous thing you can do. So Fitz, why don't you talk a little bit more about that? Because most people listening are probably thinking, Fitz, I don't need revenue. I'll figure out the delivery, or Fitz, yeah, I need revenue. Sorry. I'll figure out the delivery later. I just need to get the deal signed.
Yeah. You know, look, I understand it, right? You know, the idea that revenue keeps the lights on is definitely something that we've all had that thought before, but that is the exact mindset that ends up bankrupting companies. It's called the capacity mismatch. And you have two engines in your business, right? You have your sales capacity, how much you are capable of running and selling, and you have your operational capacity or your install capacity, how much you can actually fulfill or install. If your sales engine is a Ferrari and your install vehicle is a golf cart, you're going to rip the vehicle apart.
Yeah, that's a good example. I like the two engines analogy. And, you know, I've seen this quite a bit over the years in the service, especially in the service-based businesses and contracting, where a company that has the idea that sales solve all ills, they go out and they headhunt 3 killer sales reps, and those reps go out and they're selling like crazy, $500K in a month or whatever. And the owner is popping champagne. Hey, you know, we're making so much money, but they only have 2 install crews, and those crews can only physically install 200,000 worth of work in a month.
Yeah, exactly. I've seen it before. So what happens then, right? The backlog grows. The customers who were excited because they were promised a, 3-week, 4-week, 2-week, whatever turnaround are now waiting 10 weeks, 11 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever it might be.
Yep.
And they start calling, and those calls get angrier and angrier, and they start,
Yeah.
leaving one-star reviews on your Google page. And the sales reps themselves, those killers that you brought in, they start getting frustrated because their commissions are delayed, or worse yet, they don't ever come in because those jobs end up canceling. And then it
Yeah.
starts to trickle down, right? The install crews are burning out because you're running them, dawn till dusk, 7 days a week. They're working 70 hours a week just to try to catch up. And they're cutting corners, and jobs are being done worse. And the quality of your work goes downhill.
Yeah, yeah. And the crazy part is that a lot of the owners will still look at the P&L and think that the business is thriving because the top line revenue looks huge. But the reality is that the operational side is a complete disaster.
Yeah, it is an absolute reality, right? It is a disaster. And this is why tracking capacity is that hidden metric that we promised to talk about today. So if you're not tracking your sales capacity against your install capacity, right, and your marketing capacity, you're really driving your golf cart in that instance blindfolded, right?
Yeah.
You have to know exactly how much you are capable of running, selling, and how much you're capable of delivering on, down to the exact job and dollar amount, per day, per hour, per minute, all of those things.
And I'm going to throw this in here, Fitz, because we talk about sales and production, but sales and marketing really go hand in hand. And so for our listeners, when we talk sales, if we don't explicitly say marketing with sales, it's both of them together. They
Mhm.
don't operate on their own. So Fitz, I want to flip this around for a second because we have been talking about the danger of too much sales capacity. But I actually think we need to address the other side of this, to be honest, which is equally dangerous. Across the country, a lot of our customers, it's the install capacity. So, what happens when you have plenty of install capacity but not enough sales capacity?
Yeah, I mean, this is huge, right? And you're absolutely right to bring it up. The capacity conversation goes, in both directions. Most business owners are really focused on the operation side. It's probably why they got into the business. They're good at doing the thing that they do, right? So they focus on the crews and getting the equipment, the overhead that they maybe over invested in to get things up and running, right? And they underinvest in the sales, maybe in marketing side of the business, and they undervalue it a bit at times. And what you end up with is a beautiful, well-oiled machine sitting idle, to kind of reference the engine again, because there's not enough work coming in the front door to keep the things running.
Sure. So I know, Fitz, you kind of have a really great way of explaining sales capacity. So why don't you talk to us about what sales capacity actually means? Because I think a lot of owners hear that term and they just think it means something like, how many salespeople do I have? But, in our conversations offline here, you've explained it to me that it's so much deeper than that.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people think about it just kind of in the simplicity of, like you said, maybe how many salespeople I have, or maybe the other side of it is how much volume I'm able to produce, like a top line revenue. And that's a small portion of the equation, so to speak. It really boils down to how much volume I'm able to handle, but on both sides of the equation, right? So marketing, your end of the equation is tasked with hitting a certain number of leads and a certain percentage of cost, right? Like everybody's got their targets that they need to hit. In order to do that, they need an available number of slots to reach their goals and their numbers and their metrics, right? Couple that with the efficiency and performance, and what you have is really the true definition of sales capacity. So it's number of available slots that are able to be filled by marketing, and then the performance that sales is able to achieve within those number of slots that are available.
So this is really where most owners are essentially flying blind. They know their install numbers cold. They can tell you exactly how many jobs their crews can run in a week, but ask them what their average rep is capable of running in a week versus what they should be running in a week, and they have no idea.
No idea. And that gap between what your reps are running and what they're capable of producing and what they should be running is where that money or profit is hiding for you in a lot of cases. If you
Mhm.
have 5 reps and they're completely full all the time, that's a sales capacity problem that most people aren't aware of. The same as it would be on the install capacity, side of the world. That would be a capacity problem on your install side. If your crews are completely filled all the time, your install calendar is being pushed further and further and further out, right? And again, we're back to that owner popping champagne bottles, thinking everything's great. We got a problem that's growing in the corner.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is big stuff. How does an owner even begin to measure that? I mean, how do you determine what good looks like for sales capacity?
Yeah. So look, we've talked about this on episodes in the past, right? You start by, having a plan, right? Understanding
Mhm,
what your growth goals look like and what your spend is going to look like. You start by understanding your seasonality of your business, right? When your
mhm,
busier seasons are, when your slowdowns are, and you start to kind of put the roadmap together of when the spend is going to increase, when the lead flow is going to increase, when your headcount needs to increase. You understand all of those things, and you go from there. So from there, Jay, it's, like I said, what we've talked about in the past. Just like you plan out the marketing calendar, you need to plan out your hiring calendar. Hire before you need them. Hire before you feel that pinch on the calendar. Everything trickles down from, again, that plan that you put together before the year starts. Marketing is going to spend this at this time, generate these leads at this time, which means I need salespeople at this time, which means they should be producing this at this time, which means then I need to have hired installers at this time, have them trained and running installs at this time, because that's when the jobs will be hitting the install calendar at that time.
yeah, that's really good, and that really what you're touching on is the difference between managing outcomes or being reactive to circumstances versus managing the processes, which is proactive. And those processes that create the outcomes, most owners are only looking at the scoreboard at the end of the game. And what you're talking about is that they really need to be watching the game itself in real time.
That's exactly right. It's a really great way of putting it. And here's, I think, the critical piece, like of the sales capacity that unfortunately, I feel like nobody really talks about.
Mhm.
And maybe, Jay, this is probably not even just the sales part, but it's the part that I know probably better than most, right? Because it goes with the install side too. There's ramp time
Yeah.
for this, right? When you hire a new rep or a new installer, they're not at full capacity on day one. They might be at 30% in month one, right? They
Hmm.
they have some inherent skills. That's the reason you brought them in, because you believe that they can do the job. But even in month two, they're not fully there, right? It might be
Yeah.
60%. And they're maybe not at, fully ramped until month three or four or whatever it might be in your training process. So
Yeah.
if you're building a proper growth plan, you need to assume your new hires are going to take time to produce at a full capacity. And that's not going to happen immediately for you. So your numbers are going to be, slow or stagnant, or, growing and building. And if you're not building that into your process in, in your preparation, and like you said, if you're not watching the game, you're going to
Mhm.
be wrong almost every time when you're pulling the trigger, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting because yeah, I mean, we both have run companies where we hire and fire, and we watch the capacity of the new people, and we analyze our training structure and what works well and what doesn't. And I think one of the pitfalls, this is just kind of a side note, is that when you're in the business working day after day, you get what's called the curse of knowledge, right? You know too much, and
Hmm.
so you bring a new person in. And you assume that they can be up to speed quickly. It's the if I can do it, anybody can do it type of mentality, which good for you that you understand that this is a job anybody can cover, but then you mistakenly think that they can be up to speed quickly. I mean, I've talked to dealers that I'm like, what's your training process for your installers? And it's like I just talked to them and then put them on a crew. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Like, and then you come to me the next week and complain that you have massive amounts of callbacks.
Yeah.
Or I mean, you've definitely talked to dealers where their sales team, they're like, my sales guy's closing at 10%. I got to get rid of him. And you're like, did you train him? Well,
Yeah. Or
sales are easy. You just go talk to people.
make a friend, right? Or worse
Yeah.
yet, we see people get into this, kind of pinch, and then they go, well, I'm going to go hire people who have a ton of experience, right? They're already
Hmm.
doing
Hmm.
this, right? And
Yeah.
then what they do is they end up hiring, two, three people on both sides of this business, like the install side and the sales side, who bring with them a ton of baggage, and
Yeah.
they're constantly fighting the, well, this is how I've always done it kind of thing. And they're never
Hmm.
able to develop their culture or create a culture that, that they want. And they're constantly fighting bad attitude, bad culture fit, like that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, what those people know when they bring them in the doors, well, you need me way more than I need you. And I'm just
Yeah.
going to continue to do it the way I want to do it. And that's a horrible place to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And then culture tanks pretty quick.
No doubt.
And so, a lot of what we're talking about here with this capacity and understanding it, this is a great example of why data driven capacity models can grow revenue up to 15% faster than those that don't. You're not guessing anymore. You are predicting with precision, which I think is
Mhm.
powerful.
Mhm. Yeah.
So let's make this real for the audience because I know for a fact you've lived through both sides of this. Take us through maybe a moment in time where you realized your sales capacity had completely outpaced your operational capacity.
Yeah. I try to like push this one way, way down and
Yeah.
don't think about it anymore. Probably my therapist would not be thrilled to hear this episode.
Yeah.
But yeah, one of my stops actually, it's one of the reasons I think I got the opportunity to take over a role that I did. We were already out of whack in a capacity, scenario when I took over, but it became increasingly more painful, in the first couple of months that I was there. So it was very early on at one of the businesses I was at. We were operating in the one call close model, like I'm a big believer in, and
Yep.
we had really dialed up the sales training, and we had a very good group of guys with us. We had absolute killers on that team, and we were closing deals at a ridiculous rate. And truth be told, I thought I was a genius. We were bringing in revenue, I think, faster than we ever had before. And I was getting high fives left and right from people around the country. It was a really exciting time on the sales side.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So then talk about the breaking point.
Yeah, well, the breaking point, I remember it because it was a Tuesday morning before a sales meeting. And I walked into the office, and my office was just past our operations manager's office. And we had these big glass windows that were there. And I looked in and I saw my operations manager, and he looked as though he hadn't slept in about 3 days. He always looked a little disheveled, but he looked a little
Yeah.
extra that time. And I poked my head into his office, and it's like, "Hey, man, what's going on?" And he showed me the schedule. So we had actually sold, I think it was like roughly like 40 or more jobs the previous week. Again, it was a great thing. I'm getting ready to celebrate
Hmm.
this with my team.
Yeah.
Um, the problem was is we only had the manpower to install about 15 a week.
Oh, man.
And we were already about 12 weeks behind. So we, and the sales team, like I said, was already selling on average, 35 to 45 jobs, a week at this point. So we were in a really big pinch point, at that point.
Yeah. Sounds like you guys were literally selling yourself into a corner.
Yeah, I mean, it was getting painful at that point. Our general manager came in, and he was aware of the situation at that point, and he had to make some really unfortunate, hard decisions. So he comes in and sits us down, and like I said, it was probably about an hour or so before our sales meeting, and he had to turn the engine off because, truthfully, I think he had fallen asleep at the wheel a little bit, and we slowed down marketing, which in turn was going to slow down our top salespeople, and
Hmm.
it cost us big time. Jay, we
Yeah.
actually lost a couple of our really good people. It was an absolute nightmare.
That's just a brutal lesson to have to learn.
It is, look, capacity is a killer. There's no other way to say it. You don't get you don't get that dramatic crash like I had, right? Like, I mean, I think it doesn't happen like that. It's
Yeah.
usually like a slow bleed. We had a couple of things that
Yeah.
were, playing against us there in that particular instance. But the problem is that, the overhead keeps running, the operational team keeps showing up, but the revenue is not there and it's not sustainable. If you don't have to make some of those, you have to make some of those hard decisions like our general manager had to make. And the problem is that all things look good on the surface, like you were talking about, right? Like we're celebrating big wins, for a couple of weeks there. The revenue looks great. But at the end of the day, what we preach and what we talk about all the time is like top line revenue is really cool looking, but what matters is what you collect and what you keep. And
Yeah.
if you're not watching this capacity thing, like unfortunately, we had to learn the hard way in this instance, all that
Mhm.
stuff is kind of make believe. And we lost jobs, we lost good people, and what we had started to build was kind of like built on popsicle sticks. It all fell apart. And
Mhm.
we had to kind of start all over a couple of weeks later almost.
Yeah, and both sides of that engine have to be running, and on the ops side, good work doesn't sell itself, and so the opposite of that is you have a underperforming sales team, and you've got tons of capacity on operations install side, and you've got to take the time to build both sides, build the sales capacity to match the operational capacity, and both engines have to be running at the same speed. You know, and to go back to our Ferrari and golf cart, you can run two golf carts, you can run two Ferraris, but they need to be running with each other.
Yeah. Yeah. Both engines have to be running at the same speed. That's it, man. That's the whole show right there. And I'll even kind of rephrase it a little bit. It's all three engines, right? Because we do
Mhm.
have kind of three engines here: marketing, sales,
Yeah.
and installer operations. So Jay, let's give the audience framework for this so they have something to kind of take away. How do you actually build a balance for kind of all three pillars of the business, all three capacity equations, if you will?
hmm I'm going to say something that's going to be shocking and controversial. It starts with knowing your numbers.
How about
That's
that?
it. Mic drop, right? And know it on all three through all three divisions. Know your numbers on marketing, know your numbers in sales, know your numbers in production. On the install side, you need to know exactly how many units or jobs your current team can flawlessly execute in a standard week. And we're not talking heroic weeks. We don't need to plan for 70-hour work weeks. We want to do a sustainable 40-hour week that is your operational ceiling.
Yeah. Look, and on the marketing and sales side, right? Know how many, raw leads they can bring in a week,
Mhm.
what the conversion rate looks like, right? And what the stick rate looks like, right? How many actual appointments and demos they can create. And on the sales side, you need to know your average reps run rate, not their best week, not their worst week, what their realistic, consistent weekly production looks like. Then compare that to, again, that marketing projection and seasonality, and know when you need to add people or take people, that kind of thing for training. That's the capacity number that goes hand in hand on both sides of the business there.
Yeah. And then when you know those two numbers and you know that they're aligned, you have a healthy, scalable business. And I got to say, this is a culture thing too, where sales is excited to keep the production busy and production is excited to stay busy. So
Hmm.
when they're out of alignment in either direction, you have a problem that really needs to be fixed immediately.
Yeah. Look, the second piece of the framework is I guess, the predictive tracking. If I were going to put it in a phrase, you can't wait until like your backlog is 12 weeks deep or appointments are being pushed out a couple of weeks to realize you have a problem.
Yeah.
You got to have a simple dashboard that tracks those numbers weekly, side by side. If your sales velocity hits 80% plus of your install capacity, that's your trigger to start hiring on the operation side. If your marketing or lead capacity is running at, for me, it's 85% or more, really, that is your trigger to invest in hiring salespeople.
Yeah. Yeah, those are good numbers to keep track of. They just lend to clarity. The third piece of this is the communication loop. And, Fitz, you and I like to talk a lot, and communication for us is a big deal internally with our teams. And the disconnect that can so easily happen within a small business is each of the divisions accidentally get siloed. And so marketing, sales, and operations end up they don't talk to each other. They've each got their own problems to solve, right? And
Hmm.
so you really need, in this third piece, you need a weekly capacity meeting where everyone shares exactly what the current lead times are. In marketing, you look at the seasonality of it. Hey, it's home show season. You guys are going to be slammed, right?
Hmm.
Hey, it's the 4th of July weekend. Lead flow is probably going to be light this week, right?
Hmm.
And you need to know what those lead times are. You need to know what sales is doing, and sales needs to tell operations exactly what's coming down the pipe. So it just kind of is break down those silos and get each division talking to each other.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's the golden rule in life, but that's probably the golden rule inside of our business, right? Everyone has to be on the same page, on the same team, if you will, right? If you enforce that one rule, you're likely to eliminate, 90% of your customer service nightmares. I've seen it happen too often.
Yeah, man. Yeah, let's bring up the good old years of COVID. One of our customers did luxury retractable awnings during that time. And production for the physical awnings was out to just simply a question mark. Hey, when will
Yeah.
we get our new shipment of awnings? And they
Yeah.
said maybe this year. Like that was the manufacturer's answer.
Hmm.
Maybe this year.
Yeah.
And oh gosh, what a nightmare of a year. People were stuck at home and spending money, but then the sales guy's like, "Yeah, we can get it installed. hopefully by the end of the year.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like we had a lot of cancels that year, unfortunately. It was October and customers like, the awning season's over. Cancel my order. Now, obviously, that's an extreme case. In a much more practical, use case in the current climate is if you're having your sales and your install times timed well, then customers, they're going to be like, man, they showed up on Tuesday and they had my floor done within a couple of weeks. I mean, that's just 5-star reviews are where it's at. So, all right, let's bring this home with some actionable takeaways from our daily inspirations rundown. If you're listening to this and you know your capacity is out of balance on either side, here are 3 things you need to do this week.
Yeah. All right. So step one, put a target or a goal in all 3 areas of your business today. What is your actual install capacity per week? And what is your
hmm
actual sales capacity per week? And what is your marketing team capable of generating each week? If you know each one of those numbers, you're not running blind anymore, right? You have
hmm
the ability to make good decisions.
That's great. Step 2 is we would say implement the 80% rule. Set a trigger somehow in your business so that the moment your sales hit 80% of your install capacity, you begin the hiring process for the operational side. And if your install capacity is running below 70%, you begin investing in marketing and sales immediately. Do not wait for the pain to force your hand.
Yeah, that's a good one. All right. So step 3, right? Force the conversation. Schedule mandatory 15-minute weekly sync between your leaders in all 3 divisions. They all need to know where each other are currently, what is coming and what adjustments they need to make, if any, right? These
Yeah.
conversations will prevent any potential pain points from sneaking up on anyone. And I'll add to that too, right? The conflict that can happen between these departments. And we see this, the headbutting, it goes away when everybody knows what everybody is doing and what they're working on, or what they're struggling with and how they're trying to counteract those struggles. So that conversation, even if it's for 15 minutes, goes a long way.
Yeah, that's really good. Everybody on the same page, speaking the same language. They're all driving Ferraris. That's how you build a business that scales without breaking.
Absolutely. And if you thought today was maybe heavy, wait until next week. We're going to talk about the one thing that is quietly destroying a sales team's confidence, and you're probably doing it without even knowing it. It's a leadership blind spot that we see in almost every growing company. You'll not want to miss that one.
I am looking forward to this one. Those sales guys can be so confident. So thank you for tuning in to this episode. If it brought you value, please like it, share it, subscribe, send it to a business owner friend who needs to hear it. Oftentimes we can see what someone needs to do and they can't see it. But if we tell them, they won't listen. So we're happy to be the bad guys for you. Send us to a friend that needs to hear this. So like, subscribe, leave us a review.
Yeah, I definitely don't mind being the bad guy every now and again, right?
Yeah.
Hey, we appreciate you guys. Until next time, Jay, it's always a pleasure, sir.
Yep.
All right, keep on building, keep growing, and happy hunting, everybody.
We'll catch you next time. Same mic, same grind, big laughs, big talks. Yeah, we're built different, all right. Thanks for watching. Now get back to work.